Here are two scary stories told to me by babysitters. Looking at the clock. This happened back in the 1990s, long after the time babysitting became a common theme for scary movies. Personally, I didn't watch things like that, so I really wasn't afraid that any of those far-fetched stories would happen to me. I was 17 years old, and every Friday night I would babysit for the Wilson family down the street. They were a relatively young, yuppie-ish couple who went to parties every Friday and needed someone to babysit overnight for their two kids. I'm not sure what kind of parties they attended, but they were typically out all night. Wouldn't get back until 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 in the morning. It wasn't much of an imposition or a concern for me because they paid me well and I liked the kids a whole lot. The children in question were an 11-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. They had a pretty typical relationship for children about that age. The boy, although the mother was not very happy about it, liked to watch scary movies and read comics. He was always trying to scare his little sister, especially when his parents weren't around. I had an older brother too, so I knew what it was like. The boy would try to scare me too, but that never succeeded. On this particular Friday, it was mid-fall and quite cold outside. As usual, I got to their house around 6 p.m. The parents went through their list of rules that I had already memorized. They told me they would like me to prepare dinner, gave me a recipe, and gave me the exact same approximate return time they gave me every week. It was alright. Well, after we had all had a wonderful dinner, they were a relatively wealthy couple and always had lots of good food, we all sat down to watch a movie on TV. About halfway through the film, the boy, Chris, got up and left to go to the bathroom upstairs. When he came back, he plopped himself down on the couch and just kept watching the movie. When the movie was in its last commercial break, Julie got up and it was obvious she had to go to the bathroom. "Don't go into the bathroom, you'll just get scared," Chris said in a sing-song and mockingly scary voice. "Stop it!" Julie cried in the typical "quit scaring me" whine that was indicative of little girls who were tired of their big brother trying to scare them. Chris smiled wickedly. "I mean it. There's a clown hiding behind that shower curtain, and he'll get you if you sit on the toilet." Chris finished by making some unfriendly spooky sounds, like woo, in an attempt to further frighten his sister. "Make him stop," Julie whined, looking over at me. She obviously had to go pee. She began dancing there in her PJs and was trying hard not to hold herself. "Stop scaring your sister," I told Chris, and playfully threw a small couch cushion at him. He laughed and hid his face behind it. Julie looked over at me, and her eyes asked me the question I didn't need to hear. "I'll come with you," I told her. Getting up, I took Julie by the hand and led her over to the bathroom door. She refused to touch the knob. "You first," Julie insisted. I opened the door and switched the light on. Opening the door widely, we faced the shower curtain. "Can you check the curtain, Pat?" Julie asked. Slowly I walked over to the opaque blue curtain. I have to admit that for some odd reason I was slightly apprehensive. It must have been that lingering fear that everybody had about showers from watching the movie Psycho. I slowly put my hand on it, paused for just a moment, and opened the shower curtain. And of course it was empty. "Will you wait outside the door?" Julie asked, and I of course agreed. When she was done, she had me come in while she flushed the toilet so the noise wouldn't scare her. We both washed our hands and went back to the movie. Now the rest of the night went by quietly enough. Chris had obviously had his fun and must have decided he didn't want to try scaring Julie any longer. Either that or he was scared himself too, which sometimes happened. By 10 o'clock, both kids were in bed and had been asleep for at least an hour. I generally also went to bed around 10:30, so I would sleep in the Wilsons' extra room until they got home. So I got ready for bed and went into the spare room. Now, I've never been the best sleeper in the world. I always like to know what time it is, and I would always wake up every hour or so and look over at the clock. This room had a large digital clock with red numbers on it, so I could wake up, turn around, see the clock easily, and go right back to sleep. I must have fallen asleep at some point, and the last time I remember seeing the time on the clock, it was about 11. I woke up at 11:45. I saw the light of the clock. I turned over and fell back asleep. Later on, I was woken out of my sleep by a sound. Looking at the clock, it was 12:30. I heard Julie's voice. "Pat, can I sleep in here? I think there's a monster outside my window." I was groggy, but I of course had no problem with Julie sleeping in my room. Chris had scared her earlier, and it made sense that she probably was seeing or hearing things. Besides, having her sleep in my room with me would be a lot easier than getting up and checking her room out just to make sure it was safe. She crawled in bed with me, and I looked at the clock. It was 12:32. I fell asleep. I was woken up later by a noise. Looking at the clock, it was 1:08 a.m. I heard Chris's voice. "Pat, I'm sorry for scaring Julie earlier. Can I sleep in here with you guys? I think there's a monster outside my window." Although I was exhausted, I chuckled to myself. As I mentioned, my brother used to try to scare me when I was younger. I always wished that my brother would have ended up scaring himself, and although it was unlikely, I never stopped wishing it. Chris was a lot nicer than my brother was, though, so I agreed, and I let him climb into bed. And he was a boy. It was unlikely he would learn a lesson, but I didn't want to be mean. I looked at the clock, and it said 1:12. Then I drifted off again. I woke up a bit later. This time the clock said 2:39. I was happy I had actually slept for more than an hour without waking up. And I looked at the kids. They were sleeping just fine, so I went back to sleep. The next time I woke up, something very odd happened. I at first thought I must have rolled over because I didn't see the clock. Being very obsessive about my ritual, I knew I had to roll over and look at the clock before falling asleep again. However, after my head cleared just a little bit, I realized I was facing the direction of the clock, but there was no clock. I groaned, realizing that we must be having a power outage. I would never be able to get back to sleep if I didn't know what time it was. Right after I groaned, however, a black shadow moved, and the clock became visible at 3:24 a.m. It only took a moment for me to realize that I hadn't seen the clock because somebody or something was standing in front of it. I screamed before I realized it was a dumb thing to do, and I woke up both kids, who panicked. "Get out of the house!" I yelled at them as I saw the shadow coming towards us. It didn't take the kids more than a few seconds to know something was wrong. Julie started screaming, "It's the monster!" And Chris echoed the sentiment, and they both jumped up and ran like hell. I tried to follow them, but I wasn't fast enough, and whoever was in that room got a hold of me. I tried screaming again, but he shoved his hand over my mouth. Trying to think of what I could do, I tried stamping on his foot, and although he yelped, it only made him hold on tighter. He was way too strong, and I was not getting away. I tried to console myself in my terror that at least the kids had gotten away. I kept struggling, and he threw me towards the bed, and I didn't hit it right. I fell and hit the floor, and my arm hit the metal frame of the bed, and I felt a crack. The man came towards me quickly, and I started crying. As the man grabbed my arm, I prepared for the worst. Then I heard a gunshot. I cringed. Then I noticed my assailant screamed in pain, and he fell on me. However, he didn't remain on me very long. He rolled over on the side and grabbed his arm. Looking up, I saw the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. The father of the kids had gotten home and apparently retrieved his gun from his own bedroom, a gun I didn't even know he had. Feeling a new rush of energy, I jumped up and ran right past him. I ushered both kids out of the room, down the stairway, and out of the house. We ran to the neighbors who had been awakened by the gunshot. They had already called the police. The police came and found the man, being held at gunpoint by the father, and they arrested him. It turned out that the man had been trying to abduct children in the area. Both kids had already been scared because of Chris's stories that they had been sleeping very lightly and were woken by the man trying to get into the house. They assumed there was a monster trying to get in their rooms because they had heard noises, but they hadn't really seen anything. He was trying not to wake me up so he could take the kids. He, in fact, had been in the room with us, trying to pick the right moment to grab the kids. He was cautious because he had seen me waking up every half hour or more. My looking at the clock had kept him from acting sooner. It probably saved those kids, too. After talking to the police, the scariest part was that they told me, once I had woken up, he wasn't intending to abduct me. He just wanted me out of the way. However, since he was attacking me, I assumed that meant he was going to kill me. I still sleep with a digital clock in my room. I can't sleep without one. Whenever there is a power outage, though, and I wake up and don't see that number, I assume the worst and start screaming. It's terrible what some sick assholes do to screw you up for the rest of your life. The show. When I was in high school, I began babysitting for the family of my best friend. She had one brother and one sister, 5 and 7 years old. I was a year behind my friend in school, and she had left to go to college and could no longer watch her younger siblings, so being that the family knew me very well, they hired me as their babysitter. They were both really nice parents, rather wealthy, and they owned a big and beautiful townhouse. Well, one Friday night, the parents had a party that they had to go to. I showed up at 7 p.m. and they told me they didn't expect to be back until very late. As usual, this was like being paid to enjoy myself. The children were so young that they were usually in bed by 8:30, asleep by 9, and I had hours by myself to talk on the phone, watch television, and basically do whatever I wanted to. Now, on this particular night, I had been talking to another friend of mine, Steph, for a while, but she had to be in bed early. She was a cheerleader, and the team had a away game the following afternoon, so she had to get up to be on the bus. By the time 10 o'clock rolled around, I resigned myself to an evening of watching cable television and eating junk food. After fixing myself a sundae covered with nuts and hot fudge and even a few little pieces of banana I was able to chop up, I sat down in front of the television and made myself comfortable. Flipping the TV on, there was some strange repair show on. There was a guy and he was mixing concrete and what looked like to be a wheelbarrow. And beside the wheelbarrow he had a bunch of cinder blocks stacked up behind him. It looked like he was making some sort of wall. I really couldn't care less about that sort of thing, so I changed the channels. Only when I changed the channel, the same show was on the second channel as well. Cable can sometimes be like that, though. So irritated, I flipped the channel again. Only the same show was on the other channel. So I kept flipping it over and over and over again, and each time I flipped the channel, it stayed on the show, and it never missed a beat. The man was mixing the mortar and lining up the bricks. I really did not know what was going on. As I was wondering if there was some strange issue with the cable or something, the man looked directly at the screen, and I felt as if he were looking straight at me. This was not nearly as scary, though, as when he addressed me by my name. "Cindy, I think you need to come downstairs right away." Fear flowed through my body like I cannot explain, and although I didn't know how to react, I knew I was not going to go downstairs if somebody were down there. I started fumbling for my cell phone so I could call the police. "Don't call the police, Cindy. You won't have time," the man told me. Then I watched as he pulled the 7-year-old boy I was babysitting right in front of the camera. He started patting the boy on the head and said, "I suggest you get down here really quick." Not knowing what to do, but immediately feeling protective of the boy, I began to run into the basement door. I stopped, though, because I was in the room with the fireplace, and I grabbed a poker. So then I went to the basement door, I flung it open, I flipped on the light, and after a moment's hesitation, I ran down the stairs. It was an unfinished basement, as I knew, and there was a pile of cinder blocks down there, and a wheelbarrow with mortar, but there was not a single person there. I felt like my heart was trying to escape my chest and push its way up my throat and out my mouth. Somehow, though, I managed to calm down, and when I realized that whatever I'd seen on the television must not have been live, it was recorded, there's probably nobody in the house. Unnerved, but not nearly as afraid as I had been before, but still holding the poker, I made my way back up the steps, and I closed the basement door behind me. I have to admit I didn't turn the light off. I walked over to the television, looking behind it, and saw that somebody had connected a computer to it. The video had ended, and I turned the television off. I honestly began thinking this was just a prank that maybe my friend that went off to college set up. She likely taped the video with a friend and her brother and had set me up. I chuckled a bit, realizing it was a pretty good joke. I had played some pretty good jokes in my life on her, so I really couldn't be mad, and I appreciated a good laugh, even though I was not laughing when it happened. Still, though, on the off hand that something wrong was going on, I figured I should give the house a once-over. First and foremost, I checked the kids' rooms, and both of them were in bed, sleeping just fine. I checked under their beds, in their closets, and behind any furniture. Then I went in and I thoroughly inspected the parents' room, and there was nothing. After checking the kitchen, the den, and all the other rooms, I was completely convinced that my friend had just played a really bad prank on me. I figured I was going to text her and tell her, "You got me good with that one." I rechecked the front door, though, still a bit frightened to see if it was locked, and it was. So, lastly, I walked over to the coat closet by the front door to check that out. I opened up the closet door as quickly as I could, and I scanned the floor while pushing the clothes and coats aside so I could see if anybody had been hiding behind the clothes. And no one was standing or hiding behind the clothing, so I was happy, and I sighed with relief. "Look up on the shelf," I heard the voice from the video say to me. My first reaction was to freeze. Slowly I looked up at the high shelf in the closet and saw the man from the video laying on the shelf, his body stretched out, his hand resting on a crooked arm, and a wicked smile crossing his face. It was horrifying that I hadn't thought to look up there, and to also know that not only as he was watching me as I searched the closet, he could have grabbed me at any moment. His smile widened. He then said to me, "I'm gonna get ya." And then he moved quickly, jumping off the shelf. Fortunately, although he was fast, he was still on the shelf of the closet, and I had a small bit of a head start. It wasn't much, though, and I didn't even make it to the door before I felt his hand grab my hair and my head and jerked me back. I fell back and hit my head, and everything went completely black. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. It took me a while to get my bearings and a while for my wits to come back to me. Fortunately, before I had a chance to freak out too much, my mom came in the room to talk to me and calm me down. Apparently at some point after the attack, the little girl had got up and was looking for me. When she couldn't find me, she woke her brother up, and he was older and smart enough to call the police. The police came over to investigate, and unfortunately, the man and his laptop were gone. He must have known the kid called the cops. Fortunately, the kids weren't harmed. Even more fortunately, The man was easily identified as the contractor the family had hired to finish the basement for them. That's why the boy had willingly made the video with him. The boy had told him about Cindy, his babysitter. It is how he knew to set everything up. Unfortunately, the man left his home and was not found by the police. Unfortunately, the police told me that they found me in the basement, tied up to a kitchen chair. The man had his cinder blocks and mortar prepared, and he had already placed 8 cinder blocks in front of me. 5 on the bottom and 3 over him, starting to make a little wall. Hello Orange Cat, I want to thank you for listening to this video and hope that the quality of the sound has improved a whole lot. As I've decided I want to narrate more stories, I figured I needed a better microphone, and that's why it took a long time to get this second video out, but I will be updating with new content a lot more regularly. I hope that you'll want to hear it, so please subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to having you hear my new videos as they come out. So enjoy the videos, and remember, no matter how much you want to believe it, no matter how much you convince yourself differently, you're never truly alone.